My name's Kate Rufener. I play Persephone Colossi on the Reclaimers podcast. This is a companion piece to the Reclaimers. We are doing this because some of the Reclaimers content material might be a little triggering for those who've experienced gaslighting, manipulation, emotional abuse, or intimate partner violence. Those are the 4 things that we cover in the Reclaimers. It's very important to us that we cover those in a realistic way. But it's also very important that we reach out to survivors who may get triggered by episodes. I've heard from members of our cast who have said that they've been triggered, and I've heard from listeners who have said that they've been triggered. And so in advance, I would just like to say the triggers are there for a reason. Please pay attention to those. And if you do get triggered today, feel free to reach out to us. And this isn't a substitute for mental health counseling or any sort of treatment. Though our website does have some great recommendations for how to find those things. So I'd like to introduce these 2 wonderful people with me. This is Dianna Graham, and she plays Nina Day and Nina Day, excuse me, gotta say this correctly. For those of you Googlers out there, have fun with that name. Nina does not appear in the season until much later. So some people get to interact with her and some people don't. And I'm really sad about that. Stephen and Dianna never get to interact with one another. It's very sad. Dianna is a brilliant actor. She's a dialect coach. She's a voice actor. She is one of the loveliest and kindest people. And I will stop saying nice things since that will just continue to make her blush. Right. But I could say all the nice things about her. And speaking of nice things I could say about people, this is Stephen Kerr. Stephen is actor, voice actor, the kindest and best of men himself. So I am so glad. Stephen plays Senator D. Mycroft Daniels. And this is a very tough role to play. And that is part of the reason why we're doing this. We wanted an opportunity to address the fact that Stephen is this incredible human. He is playing this monster. And we just wanted an opportunity to resolve some of the triggers that have come up thus far in the season and that will continue to come up as we portray this type of abuse realistically. So I just want to start us off with I'll ask the first question and then we can ask questions from there between the 3 of us. Let's talk about this episode. This is the first of our D-value episode. Stephen, how are you feeling about it? It's been a while since we touched it. We recorded it. It's been I think 7 weeks now since we recorded it, and now it's released. So what are your thoughts, friend?
Yeah, it's one of those episodes that is, it's hard to listen to.
Yeah.
It's hard to listen to for me because of my own background with personal relationships of as I mentioned, I think on our last one that we shared where we did an interview because of my daughter. And so this is a tough episode. There's no 2 ways about it. This is a hard one to listen to. It's a hard one to act in because of when you have a relationship, as I do with you, where we're good friends and we love and care about each other as friends. And yet here we are where I'm literally this monster. I mean, that's what acting is take on these roles and you play these things. But this one is really, this one's tough.
Yeah. And this one sort of starts a slippery slope of things throughout the rest of the season too. So because this is the first of our D-value arc. So Stephen, I just want to make sure that we're okay, discussing family relationship and everything like that. I want to make sure that we don't venture into territory that reveals anything. But just really quick, your daughter's okay with us revealing that?
Yeah, I talked with her about it a few days ago, and I shared with her that this is something that we're going to, that we would be, number one, just the podcast itself, just reminding her.
Yeah.
And she is very excited to go and listen to the entire podcast and feels like it's going to help her.
That's wonderful.
And so that's great. But she knows that, that we're doing this in such a way to help and also be careful.
Yeah.
Talk about things.
We're not going to go into details more than that, other than that you were related to her and she's had this experience, and that is really tricky. And you had to observe that. I have thought a lot about that with the observation piece. This podcast sort of feels like we are listening in on that. So what I'm hoping is that those who've had to observe their loved ones might find comfort in this as well. So that's something there. Dianna, what are your thoughts on the episode?
Oh, well, I had a number of things. First of all, it was great. It was, I mean, I don't want to say like, oh, one of the better, one of the, but it was definitely one of the stronger episodes I've listened to in the series and in the season. And it was painful to listen to. And first of all, Stephen, part of it is, I for weeks, audience members don't know this, but for weeks I've been hearing things and going, what a great thing. And, oh, Stephen, and I get all silly and yet I didn't have that perspective. I didn't understand that background about you. And so I kind of just want to apologize to you and tell you I love you. And I know that this is not who you are, but these stories are important, stories.
Yeah.
They're worth telling, and somebody has to do it. And who better than someone who understands it and can do it without being a mustache twisting villain, which you do a beautiful job. So it was a powerful one. It was very, very painful. And you could see that, like, the devaluing thing is like, oh my gosh, he's shutting her down. So yes, I'm not going to say it was triggering, but it was a powerful episode with a lot of honesty in it. When you were recording, and now as you're hearing it again, are there things that you're doing I know that you take really good, excellent care of your physical body.
Stephen is a health coach, just to mention that very quickly. And he's a brilliant health coach,
wonderful
artist, as he likes to call himself. Yeah.
Yeah. And what are you doing to care for your heart and your soul and your emotional well-being?
I think the main thing has been, it's been hard. I can't say that this has been something that has been easy to go ahead and read and not think about the past. And so, I'm one of those people that these episodes, and not even the episodes that I'm in, but other episodes, are triggering for me. And because of my own life experience. And so, as far as self-care, I am a big believer in just kind of having like a good starting every day with like a positive affirmation and thinking about that positive quote throughout the day to kind of help ground me. That helps me on a daily basis to be able to kind of get through.
Stephen, you mentioned an empowering tool. You mentioned empowering tool number 3, mantra. And that is so cool that you're talking about using that. But here we are, the actor who plays Mycroft is using an empowering tool. I'm sure somewhere the fantastical Percy and Feeney are like getting super jazzed about that. That's great. That's cool.
First question is, how is this episode different from the love bomb idealization episode?
Sure. I'll take that one first, and Stephen, you can. Okay, so there are 3 distinct phases, though they're not always linear. And I think that this is one of the tricky parts, is that we expect that any psychology stage or phase is going to have a linear aspect in any given relationship. And when it comes to narcissists, these are repeatable. And they might not be linear. They may be crashing on top of one another at any given space in the relationship. And they may come back or go away depending on what the narcissist needs or where they are in the relationship, and also whether or not they have supply in other areas. And when I use the word supply, I'm talking about the emotional response that their victims give them. So any emotional response, whether it's good or bad, whatever it is that is considered supply, the narcissist is looking for a reaction. Because at its heart, and this is one of the saddest things, and I hate saying this, not because I don't want to understand a narcissist, but I feel like there are victims out there who are going to use this as justification to stay in the relationship. And that's not okay. And you need to get the support you need to get in order to leave. But emotional supply, where that comes from is the narcissist's deepest fear is abandonment and people forgetting about them. So from that deep-seated fear comes this manipulation and gaslighting, that they will absolutely manipulate people to remember them no matter what. They would rather be remembered for anything. So I always use the example of Timothy McVeigh when I say that name. It's a name that many people know as the Oklahoma City bomber. He said that he would rather be remembered for the bombing than he would for any other of his life's actions. And that is one of the saddest things I have ever heard. And it's also one of the hardest things because ordered personalities don't feel that way. So within the relationship with a narcissist, you will start off with a love bombing, seduction, idealization phase. That is where they try to demand as much time as they possibly can, where they try to insert themselves into as much of their victims' lives as possible, and where they try to become someone's soulmate or the thing that someone has always wished for. So for example, Mycroft talks a lot about being Seffi's father, because it's very clear that she has quote unquote daddy issues, and that has been a problem for her. So him inserting himself into that and saying, I will be that person for you, feels like a dream come true. And that is love bombing. It's a type of gaslighting. Now we are in this phase between Seffi and Mycroft called the devalue phase. And this is where Mycroft can just let off little messages that say, I'm unhappy with you. I disapprove of what you've done. I'm not entirely satisfied with what you're doing. So that Seffi begins to feel obligated to step up to that and to try harder to please him, to gain his approval, or to get him back to the love bombing person that she knew in the beginning. The last phase is called the discard. Lots of people think the discard is just, I'm going to get rid of you or break up with you. But no, the discard is when the narcissist decides they're done trying. They're not going to try anymore. That is the discard phase. So between these three phases, there is actually a loop that slides people back into this so that it is an endless circle. As I mentioned, it's never linear. It always goes back to that. And the idea is that the narcissist is always angling to get you back into love bomb and to do as little love bomb as possible so they can begin the devalue and get to the discard, because the discard is the most satisfying phase. So the difference that I see in this is where Mycroft begins to let go of the mask a little bit. He goes back and forth very quickly, hot and cold very quickly. And the other thing that I see in Stephen's performance more than the writing, and yes, thank you for all those compliments on the writing, but I got to comment on this with Stephen's performance. There was a lot of, he would go into this very warm, booming, inviting, and then there would be very short, clipped, annoyed, and if you listen for those things in the delivery, that's incredibly mechanical. But it's also so effective. Listen to the places where he elongates his vowels, where he invites her in, where he extends his words, and you can practically hear the love bombing in those instances.
Yeah. And how about you, Stephen?
Well, I was just going to add to that, and that is, I think one of the things, just from an episode standpoint, the sound effect of the clock ticking or what?
Holy, right?
Okay. It's just like, as soon as that starts, it's like, it's like trigger right there, right? Like,
Yeah.
Here we go with the clock, and I'm already getting tense just listening to that before a line is even, delivered.
Yeah.
But having that going on in the background, it is really unsettling.
That was sheer brilliance. That was all our audio engineer, Ryan Bruckman. So 100% Ryan.
Yeah. And of course, we didn't know, or I didn't know that was going to be placed in there. It's brilliant to listen to now, but now with those layers, it just makes it that much more effective and triggering, because it definitely brings you into those moments. And into the devalue that much stronger.
Absolutely. Well, and like hearing those, when when Kate was first talking about these different stages, you know, it's so funny because any of us who've had experience, when we've, you know, experienced some type of abuse, and I don't know how many malignant narcissists I know, but a lot of many people with different, you know, mental illness or things like that sometimes do similar types of things, right? This isn't isolated
Yes.
to people with personality disorders,
Right.
But which is so important for us to remember. But my reaction to the episode that I could hear, you know, I noticed, I didn't notice the clock as much, but I noticed your rhythms, what she was talking about. I noticed that shortness, and you almost sound like she's victimizing you, which is one of your best. I mean, I'm kind of jumping to the gaslighting thing, but like, you know, like, oh my gosh, you can't keep doing this to me anymore type, you know, and but it is difficult to hear both of you in it. It's difficult to hear those changes in Stephen's voice, and it's so difficult to hear how reduced you are by what he has been doing to you, between the love bombing and then, you know, and then this betrayal of sending another person off for this internship that you deserved, you wanted, that would have been great for you. And then, you know, and that reduction of Persephone, of Percy. I know, but I guess I should say Sephi. This is the Sephi version, and how reduced Sephi was also difficult to hear, but so clear. I love, I think that's one of the things I do love about this episode, in addition, is it's not obvious. None of the choices that either of you are making are obvious. It's not in your face, and yet there's such clarity what's happening at this moment in your relationship, and what you are doing to her, you know. And then it turns on a dime when you figure out that she's got something you can use, but we could tell you.
No, that's good. No, one of our concerns as a coalition is we were looking at it, and so, you know, just to reveal this little Easter egg, is that he knows she's a telepath. He's known since the beginning, and he goes into this with that. And so that was something that we were like, we're not going to be able to tell that story. And we decided it didn't matter, that it would still tell the same story for him to have that feeling and reaction to that even if the audience never understood that he knew that wouldn't matter.
Love it. Okay. Yeah.
So, and I love the way Stephen plays that whole section, from a writing standpoint, like not just as a fellow actor, that was awesome, but from a writer, it was like so satisfying to hear like all of this intent rush up under the lines and be like, okay, now we're just going to take this and drive it home. You know, that was great.
What gaslighting or manipulation techniques does Mycroft engage in? Just kind of briefly look good.
I'm going to let Stephen go for this one first.
I was going to say, as a writer, why don't you go ahead and...
Oh, sure. I mean, I can call out the writer stuff. I think the very first thing is she mentions off the top, you put her name up and you did not talk to me about it. The lack of communication is one of the key manipulation gaslighting techniques. And I don't think people see this as manipulation, but even in healthy relationships, we manipulate each other. Sorry, is that like a big psychology secret that I shouldn't say? But we all manipulate each other. I'm sorry. You know, like there it is. A lack of communication is always manipulation. It always is. Even in healthy relationships, it happens. We do things where we don't talk to each other because we want to hide from it ourselves. And when we don't communicate with ourselves, that's also manipulation that we're doing. It's totally okay much of the time, because that's just interpersonal dynamics. However, to the degree that he has promised her something and then withholds it without talking to her about it, forcing her to come and talk to him about it, and then blames her for being upset about it. That entire cycle right there is demonstrably narcissistic gaslighting at its finest. Secondarily, he talks to her about talks to everyone else about how great she is. She hears that from other people. When she brings that to him, he gets upset and says, why would I tell you? That's endangering your psyche. That is also manipulation at its finest, because at some point in the relationship, he can just drop that. He doesn't have to talk to anybody else about her at that point. Or worse, if he said nice things about her, imagine if I come to Stephen and I say, Stephen, Dianna is just the greatest thing since sliced bread. And then a month later, I come to Stephen and I say, oh, Stephen, I've just found out some things about Dianna that make me really disappointed in her character. You're going to believe me more because I started off with that foundation of praise. Because in ordered human interaction, there is very little room for this type of manipulating bystanders. So this sets the stage for him to be able to do that without her knowing, and also sets the stage for her to be silent about it. He is gaslighting her to not talk to other people and say, so what did Mycroft say about me? Right? He's trying to get her to shut up and be quiet. So that kind of silencing. There is the promise of you will be right for something, and then see, I told you you would be right for something at the end, without really any connection of how he determined her rightness for it. It's 100% that he just on a whim decided. So it is, it's making her accountable for reading his thoughts, which is ironic since she's a telepath, but a lot of narcissists engage in this with non-telepaths. So there that is. And then the last thing that I want to comment on, you mentioned this earlier, and I got to say, this is a point of pride, because the coalition struggled with how to write this, with how to put this in the episode, with how to demonstrate this. You said you almost felt like she was victimizing him from his reactions. Blame shifting is the number one manipulative gaslighting tactic. So the fact that he is able to so competently blame shift onto her throughout the episode, that is devastating. And that just killer for her as a young person, but as someone who trusts and loves him, as someone who just wants to keep him happy, that is going to devastate her, that he thinks that she would be doing something wrong. And you hear that in her constant, okay, tell me what I can do right then. Tell me how to fix it. Tell me what I need to do. She's depending on him. So those are the things. Stephen, what did you notice?
Yeah, I think it's interesting that that Mycroft told her to go to reach out for help.
Ooh, yeah.
And yet, even with that, he's kind of cutting her down for the choices that she's making.
Yeah.
And kind of tied in with that is the whole thing where he's talking about the father figure again at the beginning of the episode. And so it's like he's continuing to use that card, and they're kind of like related. It's like, yeah, but at the end of the day, I'm the one you trust. I'm the one that you trust. You can go to these other people, but you need to come to me, because I'm the one that really understands you and is going to help you. Because obviously you're coming to me because things aren't right. And so I'm going to help make things right. And you need to listen to me, and I'm going to give you assignments, and I'm going to tell you things that you're going to have to do. And I'm going to let you know when you're wrong. And, and almost like he's undercutting his own advice about going to see somebody else in a way. He's using that as a technique to eventually gain back control and have her, be able to come back to him.
Absolutely. Oh my gosh. And forgive me for my visceral reaction earlier. I was like, this like little bitty spasm in reaction to it, because, I think, first of all, that last thing, I think about gaslighting, and one of the things that has been running through my mind lately, because I've been ruminating on some crazy things and malignant and a narcissist and a widespread of impact they're having. Anyway, and the phrases that keep running through my mind is, you're trying to convince me to unsee what I've seen, to unhear what I've heard, to ignore the reality that is before me, before my very, very eyes. And And that coupled with the, you can't trust that person, you can trust me. At the end of the day, that idea of we're going to villainize any alternate, perception, anyone who would say, no, this is not healthy. This is, Persephone, like he's going to do everything he can to illegitimize somebody who might actually call this for what it really is, because he has to do everything in his power to make it be like, no, don't look out there. Look at me. It's right here. Keep your eyes on me. I'm the focal point. I'm the one you can trust. Even talking about her relationship with Feeny, and the way he has to go back there and to try to make her question her own reality. She knows this. She didn't come to him with these questions. There was no uncertainty about it. She wasn't questioning. She knew who she was. She knew her heart. And he has to and then when she's like, no, we're not. And then he has to act like, oh, here you go again, ignoring reality, and then you just want to punch him.
I think there's a little moment in there where he says, the gossip, or where she says, I didn't gossip.
Oh,
and
gosh.
That one I think is such a big one, because that one to me is one of the most misogynistic things that he says, because a lot of women are kept silent because they don't want to be seen as gossips. I just want to say off the top here, Kristen Milstead wrote a wonderful article called The Case for Deception as Abuse. She talks about how narcissistic abuse has a unique element to it, in that in order to get encased, she doesn't reference this here, but in another article, and I'm trying to remember the author, it might be Dr. Ramani who says this, but she talks about how it's like Dorothy encased in the Wizard of Oz's great lair with the wizard's head right there, but it's like there's no curtain, but she refuses to look over and see that there's a great and powerful Oz behind that curtain. But Kristen Milstead's article, The Case for Deception as Abuse, she said the unique element is that you are enslaved, ensnared, entrapped, that you are trapped in the abuse by the deception to begin with. And I think that's one of the things that I have heard a lot as I've listened to it, is even I wrote Sephi. I have these people in my life that I know, the coalition members, represent the amalgamation of Sephi. Their abusers represent the amalgamation of Mycroft, the real life people that exist around this story. And even then, I'm listening to it and thinking, Sephi, don't say that. Even then, I voiced the dang thing, and I'm listening to it and thinking, you've got to be kidding me. That's going to be your response to that clearly manipulative tactic. And I think when you're inside the deception, because so many people struggle, and you hear this on the podcast, how many of the people say, I can't call him an abuser. He's not an abuser. We had that with Rose in the first episode, in the first season. We had it with Truman, and now we just had it with Jenna, where it's just, it's not an abuser. It's not an abuser. And it's because people struggle to identify that they've been through abuse, because that deception is so clearly laid out to trap people in that. So through that lens, I want to say that someone who looks back on it will probably have a very different viewpoint than someone who's inside of it in the moment. So that's something just to note.
Excellent. Yeah. What are you, I have a comment to that, but I want to hear your thoughts, Stephen.
It's interesting. I coming from my own personal background, one of the things that I had that was very challenging was wanting to be able to go ahead and help my daughter, and being angry at what was going on, and knowing, how do I do this in such a way where the cycle does not repeat, because it had been repeating for 20 years, a long time. How do I do things? How do I treat this relationship in such a way where I can be supportive of her, help her, and not make things more challenging for her, as she tries to navigate this from this difficult situation amongst a lot of family members, that she has to continue to try and work with and live with. And it was interesting. She actually shared with me a book that she used, and I don't know if you have used this book or not as part of your library.
Sure. Let me know. I'm always wanting to add it. Oh, yeah. That's
Okay.
not in our library, but I will add it. Thank you.
But this book was what was recommended to her by a counselor.
And the book's called But It's Your Family, right?
Cutting Ties with Toxic Family Members and Loving Yourself in the Aftermath. Dr. Sherry Campbell.
Okay.
And it was really helpful for her to read this book. And then obviously it was helpful for me to read this knowing that she had read this book, so that we could have common language and have a common way forward. Because it's difficult to, it's continually challenging. It's not in the same place now as it was, 5 years ago, let's say. So at least it's in a much better place now than it was. But man, understanding and realizing that you cannot change a narcissist. You cannot change a narcissist has been the hardest thing for her. Is feeling like that she could make a change.
Yeah.
And if she just did something different, if she just said
Loved
something
him harder,
right?
right?
Or tried, it was her, the way that she was going about it was, somehow that it was something that she was doing, or that she could, because of how her own beautiful spirit, and that she wants to create harmony. That's one of her biggest things, is wanting to create harmony in all of her relationships. That's hard because she has that nature to want to create harmony. You can't do that.
No, you can't.
Somebody who's a narcissist, they don't want to create harmony. And so this book and counseling has definitely helped her. So highly recommend.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
You bring up something there too with wanting to create harmony. One of the things that I have heard in my experience as an advocate over and over and over again is, and we put this in the podcast so much because so many on the coalition have heard this, but we heard that I know I need to be healthy. I know I need to be the healthy one. I need to be the adult. I need to be the mature one. I need to be the one who brings issues up. I need to not shy away from things. I need to, like that. And I don't know if that is ingrained because all narcissists know to manipulate that, or if that is something that happens because culturally we are taught that it is healthier for us to take responsibility for ourselves in the relationship, and while I completely agree with that, I totally support that. In healthy, ordered relationships, when you take responsibility for yourself, that is also returned to you from your partner. In a toxic relationship, that becomes a sticking point where you get to be blamed for it the whole time. So I think that there's something to that I think, if I were to give advice to Steffi, like if I could make her see the moment, to get her out of the deception for a minute, I would have her just say to him when he says, when he says something truly horrible, she can just say, "You're right. I should have boundaries. I'm going to go." I wish that she would just say, "You're right. Absolutely. I don't even know what I'm doing here. Why am I spending time with you? Okay, bye."
It's really interesting that you brought that up, because that was one of the conversations that we've had together, was around boundaries. It's like, you have got to establish boundaries in this relationship, because right now it's not healthy, and you need to have the conversation. And if he's not willing to abide by those boundaries, then game over.
Yeah.
No relationship.
Well, these are, like the things that were really resonating with me, and what I so appreciate. I love that you guys got to the point of boundaries, because that was the thing. As you said, when you were in it, You don't see it. It's so difficult. And I think I'd love to share a few thoughts. And at the end, I'd love, and so maybe you can percolate this question. Maybe it's what we leave, or do we want to even get to this?
Yeah.
Is what would you, if you were with Sephi at this moment, what would you do what would you try to do to help Sephi at this moment, knowing that you can't change her perception that has been very, very manipulated by this man who at one point invited her in and presented himself as someone who was going to fill this void in her. But it is a trick question, that question, what mistakes does Sephi make as she's interacting with him? And I guess mistakes, it's very hard for me to not go, oh, you did something wrong. You know, I guess the biggest thing is would that she had placed those boundaries, that she had, you know, been able to step back and go, how does this person make me feel? How do I feel when I am with this person? This was painful. So a few of the things that popped into my head, the words that have come to my mind as you've been talking is particularly, as we talk about loved ones who are in a toxic relationship, values. Boundaries are very hard for a lot of us to set because we don't want to be mean. It's like that book, The Gift of Fear. You know, the guy's wanting to carry your groceries. You've never met him. And he wants to carry your groceries to your front door. And dang it, you should not let him do that, you know, because of what might follow. And yet it's so hard for us to be, we think it's mean to set boundaries. We think that we're not nice people. We think it's unchristian. It's on this, it's on that. Why would we marry somebody if we didn't believe the best in them? Why would we get an intimate relationship with them? Why would we lean into and develop a close personal relationship with a mentor, professor who we have tremendous faith in if we didn't believe the best in them? Is it okay for us to remember that we matter too? Our hearts matter, our well-being matters too. And it is totally not just okay, it is right and it is good to set boundaries.
I think one of the key things that I would tell Sephi is there's a difference between wartime rules and peacetime rules. And wartime rules demand that you operate in a certain way. And I think that that's what she's in right now. She's in wartime rules with him. And so she can operate within those wartime rules. She can get out of the war, exit to the peace, and live within the peacetime rules. And I would love to reach out to anyone who is feeling that way right now, that they're in a toxic relationship, that it's okay to operate on wartime rules. That when you're in war, you have to have different rules and different boundaries and different levels of accepting your own mean than you do when you're in real life. That in everyday interactions with ordered personalities, it's very different. So it's okay. You're in wartime. No one's going to blame you for operating in wartime rules.
Lovely. Yeah. Yes. I mean, I'm like lovely. I'm like, no, yes. And Stephen?
I love that. That's great. No, that's a perfect close.
It is.
I agree.
So it is not just okay to take care of ourselves, to set boundaries and preserve ourselves. It's right. It's good.
Yeah.
It's the most important.
It's necessary.
It's vital.
Yeah, it's necessary.
Yeah.
It is. Yeah.